I need you to sign this." That's how it started. Mark stood in the doorway of my cubicle, holding a policy draft like it was radioactive, his lips pressed into that smug little line he wore when he thought he was being subtle. It was 6:13 p.m. on a Thursday. Everyone else had cleared out. Lights off, laptops shut. Even the cleaning crew had already run the vacuums and left a faint trail of lemon disinfectant behind. But there he was, in my doorway, casting a long shadow over my desk and pretending like I wasn't one revision away from exposing his entire career as a curated scrapbook of outdated regs and plausible deniability. "I just need someone on record," he said, setting the paper down in front of me like it was nothing. Standard protocol. I picked it up and felt the corners of my vision shrink. This was not my draft. It was his version, scrubbed, whitewashed, every last CFR reference either stripped or reworded into oblivion. The clause I flagged from the recent DoD memo? Gone. The new NIST update on subcontractor encryption standards? Gutted. My audit trail? Erased. And my name? Printed neatly at the bottom of the signature line. If you're listening to this and haven't subscribed yet, take a second to tap that follow button and like the video. It helps more than you know, and trust me, what's coming next, you'll want to hear it. I stared at the paper for a long time, not out of confusion, out of calculation. Mark didn't ask for my feedback. He didn't care about legal exposure. He wanted insurance. He wanted a fall girl. And I almost laughed. See, what he didn't know, what nobody knew, is that I'd already spent the last 3 weekends rewriting the entire compliance framework from scratch. Quietly. Carefully. Every policy, every statute, every federal clause hyperlinked and cross-referenced in a version control system Mark didn't even know existed. My version still lived in a secure shared drive, time-stamped, metadata locked, and backed up under a sandboxed admin account I created during my onboarding month. So when he asked me to sign his version, when he looked down at me with that tired old smirk that said, "You don't know how the world works yet," I smiled right back. And I said, "I'd love to take a closer look over the weekend." That was the first time he looked nervous, because Mark Delaney didn't like when things didn't move at his pace. He liked quick wins, quiet compliance, heads down, eyes shut. The next morning, I was removed from the compliance CC lists. My access to the draft directory was revoked. A calendar invite for compliance revisions final review was sent to leadership. With no mention of me, someone forwarded it to me anyway. I started to get the picture. I wasn't just being sidelined, I was being set up. The rumors started that afternoon that one of our subcontractors, Collins Marks Security Solutions, had triggered a federal audit. Their encryption logs didn't match DoD guidelines, and we, as their federal partner, were now in scope for a potential audit sweep. Suddenly, the tension in the office thickened. Mark started holding closed-door meetings. Project managers were pulled into 7 a.m. language refresh sessions. I noticed whole sections of the vendor portal vanishing from my view. And then, one of the engineers, quiet guy named Raj, messaged me on Teams. "FYI, Mark mentioned you in the war room, said if the audit gets ugly, he's got coverage." His words. Coverage. I checked the document logs again. His version, marked Final V3, had been pushed as the official internal policy, authored by him, with my name on the sign-off line. The funny thing about compliance, it's not just about being right, it's about proving it. So I gathered everything, every draft, every email, every internal memo and Slack export, and metadata signature I had. I built an encrypted archive, exported a read-only backup, and stored it off-network under my personal credentials, just in case. Because when the hammer dropped and I could feel it coming, it wasn't going to be polite. It was going to be federal. And Mark Delaney, he'd better pray he remembered which version he filed. You ever felt your stomach drop after doing the right thing? Not because you regret it, but because you know what it means. That Monday morning, I walked into the office with a flash drive in my purse and a pit in my gut. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours the night before. The glow of my screen still burned behind my eyelids. Every CFR clause, every NIST guideline, every footnote etched into my memory like a brand. The revised compliance protocol I wrote? It wasn't a revision. It was a resurrection. We were operating on policy language that hadn't been meaningfully updated since 2014. 9 years of federal updates, executive orders, tech leaps, whistleblower cases ignored, half-assed, or taped over with boilerplate fluff. I didn't fix it out of ambition. I fixed it because if we got audited and someone actually read our documentation, it would have looked like we were still processing contracts with a flip phone and a prayer. I uploaded the new draft into the control system at 8:46 a.m., hyperlinked index, metadata chain, appendix tables with each clause traced directly to its corresponding federal reg. By 11:52, the file was gone. Not archived, not moved, just erased. And in its place, Galvic's Compliance Policy Final, v3mdelaney.pdf. I clicked into it. It was my structure, my subheads, even some of my phrasing. But every legal citation had been stripped, every timestamp scrubbed, the audit trail gone, and the author tag read MD Delaney. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just stared at the screen until the letters stopped looking like words. Then I clicked open the Sandbox Vault on my second monitor, pulled the backup, checked the hash signature, verified the creation date, author log, embedded revision history, and the chain of cross-referenced statutes I'd linked from the GSA portal and the ECFR archive. And I smiled. He thought deleting a file meant deleting its existence. He didn't realize I'd built it like a forensic trap. Every part of that document whispered my name if you knew where to look. Mark walked past my desk around 1:15 p.m., carrying a paper copy of his version. Didn't even glance my way, just strutted into a closed-door meeting with a few directors and the deputy GC. When they walked out 20 minutes later, the deputy was holding that same paper, but it was folded, shoved deep in a manila envelope like something they didn't want seen. The next day, an email went out from corporate affairs. We are currently reviewing internal compliance materials to ensure alignment with evolving federal standards. In the interim, please refrain from distributing any unofficial documents externally. Thank you for your cooperation. Unofficial. That's what they were calling his version. I kept my head down the rest of the day, answered questions, attended my meetings, but that night I stayed late. Not to finish anything, to watch who logged in. Our internal document system tracks session activity. At 7:36 p.m., Mark logged in from his laptop. He tried to pull the archive file. It bounced. He didn't have the credentials. At 7:39, he messaged me on Teams. Hey, just realized the backup copy you uploaded this morning had some useful stuff I want to pull. Mind resending? Useful stuff. That was his version of a compliment. I replied, already sent everything to legal. Should go through proper channels at this point, right? He didn't answer. At 8:01, I received a Slack from one of our interns, Carrie, who was looped into a doc review chain. She forwarded me a message she wasn't supposed to see. Mark had told the directors, I reviewed everything with Erin over the weekend. She helped draft the updates. We're aligned. I hadn't spoken a single word to him all weekend. He was building a story, one where I was the junior analyst he mentored through the revision process, one where he took the lead, saved the day, cleaned things up, and I watched, maybe assisted, maybe learned something. I left the office at 8:12 with one thought echoing in my head. He thinks the worst I'll do is disagree. He doesn't know I've already built the proof. So I waited, because the only thing stronger than a federal policy is the timing of when it lands. The first email came through at 6:04 a.m. on a Tuesday, subject line in all caps. Urgent. Collins Marks review. The contents were vague. Potential audit alignment needed. Review vendor language. Tighten terminology per updated guidance. No attachments. No citations. Just enough bureaucratic fog to keep people spinning without direction. I wasn't CC'd. I only saw it because Kevin in procurement forwarded it to me with a note. Did you get this? Thought you were point on vendor logs? I had been. For 5 months. I searched my inbox. Nothing. No previous thread. No side messages. Nothing on Slack either. At first, I told myself it was an accident. Oversight. People get busy. Then I noticed something else. The shared compliance war room folder, the one I had full write access to last week, was now read only. The vendor clause spreadsheet? Locked. A dashboard I'd personally built to track encryption requirements for 38 federal partners? Deleted. I checked the audit trail. Mark's account had changed permissions at 2:17 a.m., 2 a.m. That's when I stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. By noon, the office was buzzing. Collins Marks had apparently been slapped with a Category 2 violation. Not public yet, but big enough that word leaked through procurement circles. The rumor was they'd used outdated vendor language around subcontractor disclosure thresholds, language we had in our templates. That's when the tightening began. Mark started showing up to other teams' meetings, telling people to revise old statements, tweak vendor references, reword encryption logs. Just to clean up, he'd say. Preemptive polish. But it wasn't cleanup. It was a scramble. One by one, I saw redacted versions of our protocols reappear. Sections I'd spent weeks updating reverted back to vague, toothless platitudes. Whole clauses gutted down to best effort compliance. Meanwhile, I wasn't invited to a single meeting. Not one. Then came the message that ripped the last thread of illusion. It was forwarded to me by accident. Someone had replied to the wrong errand on Slack. It was a screenshot from a private channel between Mark and 3 senior managers. Mark. She's smart, but green. Perfect fall girl if this goes sideways. Perfect fall girl. I stared at that sentence for 10 minutes. Then I saved it to my secure drive, labeled it plainly. Thread, insurance, V1. I didn't get angry. I got deliberate. I pulled every message I'd ever received from Mark. Every change log, every meeting note, every comment he'd made on shared drafts, every Slack where he'd referenced my work as collaborative. I built a timeline. Draft A, mine. Uploaded, 8:46 a.m. Deleted, 11:52 a.m. Mark's version. Uploaded, 11:57 a.m. Audit rumors surfaced. 1:30 p.m. Access revoked. 2:17 a.m. Next day. Private messages timestamped. 6:44 a.m. It painted a perfect picture. He didn't just co-opt the work. He scrubbed the paper trail, built a false narrative, and positioned me in writing as the person to blame when it imploded. I checked the org chart again. Mark was 2 levels above me, not quite C-suite, but close. Enough to steer perception, enough to speak first in a room and be believed. But I didn't need to speak first. I just needed to prove second, and he had no idea I was already 3 moves ahead. That night, I met with one person, quietly, off-site. Her name was Dana, senior counsel in Galvix's legal review team. We weren't friends exactly, but she'd seen me pull long hours, seen the way Mark brushed off technical questions and left me to clean up after exec meetings. I didn't accuse, I didn't rant, I just showed her the difference between 2 files. Then I said, if we get audited and they ask which version passed review, I hope it's the one with the citations. She looked down at the printout, the federal statute index, the embedded metadata, my name on the digital signature block. She didn't say much, just, I'd keep backing things up, that would be smart. Then she left. I walked home with one thought burning in my chest. He wanted a scapegoat, but all he did was hand me the fuse. They walked in like they owned the place. 2 auditors, black blazers in summer heat, visitor badges clipped sideways, and expressions that said, we're not here to make friends. No advance notice, no courtesy call. Just, we're from the OFCCP. We're here for the current compliance documentation and associated vendor protocols. Please direct us to your policy lead. Mark intercepted them before they reached reception. Mark Delaney, he said, all handshakes and white teeth. Head of Regulatory Affairs. We're happy to cooperate. Come on in. Can I get you some coffee? I watched from my desk as he led them to Conference Room C, the big one with the sliding doors and the soundproof walls. He looked calm, polished, almost smug, but his left eye twitched. It always did when he felt cornered. Emails went out within the hour. Company-wide message from legal. OFCCP is conducting a standard review of our contractor documentation. Please make all files and communications available for internal legal coordination. Funny, there was nothing standard about it. By 10:17 a.m., they'd requested specific vendor logs, encryption compliance statements, contract language tied to subcontractor disclosures. By 10:43, I saw Mark pacing. By 11:12, someone from IT unlocked my access to the shared compliance folders again. No explanation, no note. And at 11:47, Mark appeared at the edge of my cubicle, one hand on the divider, voice low and rehearsed. Hey, auditors are just reviewing some historical files. No big deal, mind stepping into the side room to help clarify a few things. He didn't wait for an answer. I followed him into the room. He closed the door and leaned in, way too close for the first time in months, voice like someone narrating a hostage video through a smile. Okay, so here's what we need. They're asking about the current policy, formatting, language, sourcing. Just say you helped me draft it, and we're good. I'll do the talking. You just nod. Just say you helped me draft it. Not that I did. Not that it was a collaboration. Just pretend. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow breath, looked him in the eye, and asked, quiet and even, "Do you want the version you submitted or the version that's actually legal?" The color left his face. He tried to smirk, but it cracked at the edges. "Let's not get tangled in semantics," he muttered. "Semantics are the difference between a fine and a felony," I replied. Outside the room, I could see one of the auditors flipping through a printout. Her brow was furrowed. She circled something with a pen. I pushed open the door. "Would you mind if I shared a version for comparison?" I asked. Mark tried to interrupt. "It's a draft, nothing finalized." But the lead auditor held up a hand. "Go ahead," she said. I reached into my folder and handed over a clean-bound copy, my version, with annotations, citations, full federal cross-references. She flipped, paused, then again. "This matches CFR 6341-1. The previous version doesn't," she said flatly. Mark opened his mouth to object. The other auditor cut in. "Where's the document log for authorship?" Mark mumbled something about internal alignment and drafts being co-developed. I pulled out a second folder. Document logs, metadata trail, creation timestamps. The original upload was mine. Then it was deleted. Replaced. Silence. One of them nodded. "Ms. Caldwell, can we speak with you privately?" Mark didn't move. "I believe she's still reporting to..." "No," the auditor said. "She's not." They led me into a different room. No small talk, no smiles, just, "Do you have digital proof of submission? Internal communications? Evidence of policy suppression or alteration?" "Yes," I said. "And is there indication that your document would have ensured compliance with the latest federal guidance?" "Yes," I said again. The lead auditor leaned forward. "Then I suggest you prepare a formal statement." Behind her, I could see the corner of the conference screen. Mark was still outside, pacing like a man trying to rewind time with his shoes. But it was too late, because the version he submitted wasn't just wrong. It was illegal, and I had the version that proved it. The moment I slid that printout across the table, the air changed. Not dramatically, not like in movies where papers fly and people gasp. It was quieter than that, but no less seismic. The lead auditor adjusted her glasses. Her colleague took out a pen. And across from me, Mark Delaney stopped pretending he was still in control. They scanned the pages in silence. My version, clean formatting, section numbers that mirrored current Title 41 requirements, proper vendor encryption language as per the latest NIST update. Clause 4.2.1 was corrected to reflect the new OFCCP reporting thresholds. Clause 7.3 expanded to include the mandatory subcontractor disclosure exceptions that had been effective since last fiscal year. Every page had footnotes, references, not just guesses at compliance, but actual compliance. The copy Mark submitted, the one that bore his name and conveniently scrubbed mine, violated 3 federal clauses, 2 in procurement language, 1 in data security classification. And the kicker? His version had no version history, no author chain, no document log. Mine had it all. An email chain showing my original submission at 8:46 a.m. on Monday, an internal routing note to legal, 3 follow-up messages, a final confirmation from IT that my document had been deleted and replaced. The metadata logs didn't just show my authorship, they showed his overwrite. That was the moment Mark spoke. Softly, like maybe if he lowered his voice enough, they'd forget this was federal. "This feels like a misunderstanding. Maybe we're splitting hairs here." The lead auditor looked up. Her tone was neutral, deadly. "No, Mr. Delaney, this is a document discrepancy under federal contract law with potential financial exposure exceeding $4 million. That's not hairs. That's spine." That was the last sentence spoken in that room for at least 2 minutes. When the silence finally broke, it wasn't an accusation. It was a redirection. "Miss Caldwell, would you mind stepping into the other conference room with our legal liaison?" I nodded. I didn't look at Mark as I stood. Didn't need to. He looked exactly like what he was. A man who thought his smile could cover the absence of truth. As I stepped into the hallway, I caught a glimpse of our general counsel pacing near the elevators, phone pressed to her ear, eyes darting toward the room I had just left. In the second conference room, things were calmer, dimmer lights, fewer people. A woman from legal introduced herself as Andrea. She handed me a bottle of water like we were about to start a deposition. "Erin," she said, "we're going to talk through what you submitted, what was changed, and who was involved. You're not in trouble. In fact, it looks like you may have just saved this company from a catastrophic compliance breach. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I nodded. She opened a laptop. Let's walk through your draft, line by line. I pulled out my copy, already bookmarked. She smiled. Someone gently closed the door behind us. And I knew then, this wasn't just about correcting a document anymore. This was about shifting the narrative. Because they were no longer asking, did someone mess up? They were asking, who's been cleaning it up all along? And the answer was sitting in that room with a USB backup, a folder of proofs, and the composure of someone who'd seen this coming 3 weeks ago. They thought I was the fall girl. Turns out I was the firewall. The unraveling didn't happen with a bang. It started with a calendar invite. HR follow-up, policy authorship review. No subject line fluff, no invitation to explain myself. Just a summons with the GC looped in, 2 HR reps, and, most interesting of all, an observer from the board. That's when I knew the engine had started turning. The night before the meeting, I got a message from Dana in legal, short and surgical. GC request, bring the metadata version, not the PDF, the XML export. That told me everything. They weren't investigating the policy anymore. They were investigating the person who changed it. When I walked into the conference room, Mark was already seated, hands folded, tie loose. His confidence was cracking in places, but he still wore that public relations smirk he'd perfected over 20 years. Across from him sat Elaine, head of HR, pristine bun, thick binder, and Carlos Tran, the board liaison who usually only surfaced for fiscal year closeouts and audit risk assessments. I sat, pulled out a manila envelope, and placed it neatly on the table. Inside, a printout of the .xml file from the original document submission. Timestamp 0846 a.m., Monday. Author E. Caldwell, device ID GOV ES20 network. Node, internal secure 01 changelog none deletion log user, M. Delaney 02. They didn't ask me how I got it. They just looked at Mark. Carlos cleared his throat. Mark, can you explain why the final version submitted to OFCCP does not contain a verifiable author trail, but this version uploaded 3 hours earlier does? Mark stammered. It wasn't the dramatic kind either. It was the slow, bureaucratic breakdown of a man who'd built his whole identity on being unshakable in meetings. It's a collaborative document. I thought, look, I don't micromanage every draft. If there was a misfile, Elaine cut him off with a single sheet. Printed from the IT access log. Deletion. File ID 139CCR Drevo 3 deleted. By M. Delaney 02 time 11:52 a.m. Re-upload. File ID 9CC final V3 uploaded. By M. Delaney 02 time 11:57 a.m. Then came the line that ended his tap dance. Carlos asked, "Who gave you permission to delete her submission?" Mark opened his mouth, shut it, looked toward HR. Elaine said, "There is no documentation indicating you received approval to override her submission." Then legal added, "and no record of a collaborative draft in the review system. In fact, the version you submitted to federal auditors contains formatting and language identical to Ms. Caldwell's original, minus statute references." Mark folded, not loudly, not heroically, just slumped into his chair, exhaling a curse he thought was under his breath. Elaine turned to me. "Erin, have you altered this metadata file in any way?" "No," I said. "It's a clean export from the version archive. I can confirm checksum integrity." Carlos nodded slowly. Then he pulled out his phone and sent one email. I could see the subject line flash across his screen before he tucked it back in his jacket. Subject: Temporary removal, Delaney authorship violation. HR thanked me for my time. Legal said they'd follow up. Carlos stood and left the room without another word. Mark stayed seated, didn't look at me, didn't say a word. He knew it wasn't just about a policy anymore. It was about credibility, about chain of command, about trust with federal auditors who now had a copy of my file and the one he tried to pass off. The audit clock was ticking. The feds were still in the building, and the company now had two narratives: a legacy manager who falsified submission logs and tampered with regulatory files, a junior analyst who not only wrote the compliant version but saved their entire contract eligibility. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt precise. Because this wasn't vengeance, this was compliance, and it was finally being enforced. The final audit debrief was held in the largest conference room on the 17th floor, the one they only used for visiting partners, or, in this case, when the federal government dropped by to ask why our internal policy framework looked like it had been drafted by someone trying to get us fined. 7 people sat around that long walnut table, 3 from OFCCP, 2 from legal, 1 from HR, and me, parked at the far end, clutching a slim black folder like it was a live wire. Mark sat directly across from the lead auditor. His chair leaned back just enough to feign confidence, but not so far that it didn't look like posturing. His tie was tight, hands folded. He still believed he could talk his way through this. The debrief started like most do. Neutral tone, procedural language, lots of appreciate your cooperation, and clarifying for record-keeping purposes. But you could feel the current under the surface. The kind of slow, inevitable undertow that drags someone out to sea without warning. Then came the question that cut through it all. The lead auditor, a woman named Joyce with perfect posture and absolutely no tolerance for fluff, flipped through the packet labeled Submitted Documentation, Galvix Systems, June Revision. She looked up, deadpan. Who signed off on this revision? Silence. Mark blinked, tilted his head like he hadn't heard right, then launched into what he thought was diplomacy. Well, our team worked collaboratively on several iterations. Of course, I supervised the general language updates, and that's not what I asked, Joyce interrupted. Her tone didn't change, but the air in the room snapped cold. Who signed off? Mark hesitated. It came from my desk. But who authorized it as final? Internally, on record. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That was my moment. I reached into my folder and pulled out a single document. No theatrics, no speech, just placed it gently on the table and slid it forward. I did, I said, but not the one you reviewed. Joyce raised an eyebrow. Explain. That version, I nodded toward Mark's packet, was altered. My original draft included full citations, statutory references, and updated language aligning with CFR, NIST, and OFCCP guidelines. It was submitted to the internal system at 8:46 a.m. on June 12th. That document was deleted and replaced by the one you received. The room froze. Joyce reached for the copy I provided, flipped to the index, then the vendor section, then clause 7.3. Her fingers stopped, just one small nod, then she flipped it shut. This would have passed. No discussion, no debate, just 5 words that dropped like a gavel. Across the table, Mark's face went rigid. He stared at the folder like it had personally betrayed him. His hands twitched, still folded, but visibly clenched now. The smirk was gone. HR leaned over and whispered something to legal. Joyce turned toward me. Miss Caldwell, thank you. Your version aligns with current policy requirements and federal expectations. We'll file our report accordingly. That was it. No applause. No slow clap, just the truth, finally spoken aloud in a room where it mattered. Mark was put on administrative leave that afternoon. The official email was bland. Pending internal review regarding recent audit discrepancies. But everyone knew, you don't get escorted out by HR for a formatting mistake. By 4:00 p.m., his nameplate was gone. By 4:30, IT had revoked his credentials. By 5:00, someone from facilities was boxing up his things, and I overheard them ask, do we keep the framed award or toss it? I stayed late that night, not to gloat, not even to decompress. I just opened the internal compliance dashboard, created a new access tree, and renamed the policy archive folder, Caldwell Compliance R1. I stared at the blinking cursor for a second, then typed the note that would live with the file forever. Version approved by E. Caldwell, document integrity verified, submission pathway direct. And I sat back, finally breathing like I wasn't holding something together. The signature they needed wasn't Mark's, it was mine. The correction memo went out at 10:04 a.m. on a Wednesday. Galvix Systems, Contractor ID 61 to 788A, formally acknowledged submission of a non-compliant policy version to OFCCP, cited internal misalignment, and attached the corrected file authored by me. No embellishments, no excuses, just an unspoken message between the lines. We got caught, we cleaned it up, and we won't say her name, but we all know who fixed it. That same day, a company-wide update announced the creation of the Compliance Risk Council, a new internal watchdog unit meant to ensure no future policy misroutes occurred. I wasn't asked to apply. I wasn't nominated. I was simply copied on the first meeting invite. No subject line, just Caldwell, Council Contributor Access. 5 minutes later, my dashboard credentials updated. Elevated permissions. Read, write access to the entire regulatory doc framework. Executive view status. No one said congratulations. No one needed to. The following Monday, an email popped up from someone I'd only met twice, VP of Strategic Operations, one of the big ones. Subject, thank you. Body, we reviewed the audit final. Had your version not been produced, the fine estimate was $4.2 million. Consider this a quiet acknowledgement from those of us who saw what actually happened. No signature, no flourish, just that. And that was enough. Because the real win wasn't the council seat, or the praise, or the whispers in the hallway that shifted from Mark's girl to the one who saved our federal pipeline. It was the absence. Mark's absence. His name was purged from every working document, every revision trail, every committee list. The corner office was reassigned. The legacy files labeled M. Delaney V2 were archived and locked behind admin credentials no one would touch again. His face was gone from the internal wiki. His job title vanished from the signature block directory. And I didn't smile. I opened the next document set, Q3 Compliance Alignment for Hybrid Vendor Access, and spent 40 minutes correcting the header formatting. Arial 11, proper spacing, left-aligned footnotes. The work didn't change, but I had. People started forwarding questions to me that used to go to legal. Directors looped me into red lines. Regulatory liaisons asked for Caldwell review before anything went live. Someone in procurement created a folder labeled Aaron's Gold Standards. And still, I kept my routine. Showed up, did the work. Never raised my voice. The only difference was, now, when I spoke in meetings, people stopped typing and listened. At lunch one day, a junior analyst asked me if I felt vindicated. I looked at her. Compliance isn't about vindication. It's about keeping the structure from collapsing when the wrong people get loud. She nodded slowly. I went back to reviewing a vendor's cloud security language and added a comment. Please rephrase, reasonable best effort isn't a legal position. It's a shrug in a blazer. I hit save and moved on because the job wasn't finished. It had just finally started under the right name. The new manual went live at 8 a.m. sharp. No press release, no announcement, just a quiet update in the internal library with a new title bar, Galvix Systems Compliance Framework, v4.0, author, E. Caldwell, last revision date, verified statute reference, linked audit status, passed. Each section cross-linked to live CFR citations. Encryption clauses tied to current NIST standards. No fluff, no loopholes, no legacy jargon to hide behind. When it uploaded, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. They noticed. At 8:17 a.m., legal forwarded it to procurement. At 8:22, the VP of Contracts tagged it in a vendor review channel. Use this version. No exceptions. At 8:36, the CEO's assistant added it to the quarterly board packet. At 9:00, I got the meeting invite. Subject, Boardroom 4B, GC briefing. Attendees, me, General Counsel, Director Shah, Risk, Director Morgan, Operations. No agenda, just 3 names. I walked in 20 minutes early and sat alone for 17 of them. No coffee, no water, just silence and the faint hum of the vent system clicking on and off. When they arrived, no one asked questions. No one made small talk. They just closed the door behind them and sat across from me like a panel preparing to deliberate. The general counsel, a man named Alston with hands that never fidgeted, placed a slim envelope on the table. We're moving forward with structural reforms, he said. New oversight, cross-departmental checks, and a liaison between compliance and the board, someone who's already demonstrated clarity. He slid the envelope toward me. Inside was a badge, matte finish, silver border, deep navy lettering. Aaron Caldwell, Compliance Integrity Advisor, Office of the Board. There was no speech, no handshake, no flash of ceremony, just a glance, a nod. The kind that says, you did the thing no one else was willing to do, and you did it without needing applause. I turned the badge over in my hand once, twice. It was heavier than I expected. Director Morgan broke the silence. I've seen what you've built, quietly. We won't forget it. I nodded, slipped the badge into my pocket, and stood. As I opened the door to leave, Alston said one last thing. "We failed to listen when we should have. You didn't fail to act." The hallway outside was empty. The sun had just started cutting across the carpet in slanted golden lines. I paused near the elevators, pulled out the badge again, and looked at it in the light. I thought back to that moment in my cubicle, when Mark told me I was too young to understand compliance. Too green, too new. He'd said it like a fact, a sentence he thought time would make true. But time didn't make it true. Work did. Documentation did. Citations did. I stepped into the elevator alone and thought, too young to understand compliance? Maybe, but not too young to write the policy that saved the company. Not too young to sign it, not too young to own it, and definitely not too young to make sure they'd never forget it.